What if the nightmare of nuclear war returned, not as a distant memory, but as a real, present threat? For the first time in more than a generation, the specter of nuclear conflict between the United States and Russia is no longer a relic of history. Suddenly, the question is urgent and terrifyingly real. What happens if both superpowers, each controlling the world's most destructive arsenals, decide to launch? It begins on a frigid November morning, shrouded in uncertainty and tension. Donald Trump, in a move that shocks the globe, announces that the United States will restart nuclear testing for the first time in decades. The news ripples across continents, electrifying diplomatic cables from Berlin to Beijing. Within hours, Vladimir Putin responds, not with diplomatic caution, but with a steely, unwavering order. Russian ministries, under layers of secrecy and encrypted communication, are told to prepare for every nuclear scenario imaginable. The world's most dangerous red line, thought to be safely distant, now trembles with the weight of history. Insiders in Moscow reveal that scenarios once dismissed as the stuff of doomsday fiction are being rehearsed in windowless bunkers. Military strategists, some of whom remember the darkest moments of the Cold War, are ordered to run simulations of every possible nuclear exchange, from limited tactical strikes to full-scale strategic annihilation. Observers warn, this is not just another echo of Cold War posturing, but a pivotal moment that could fracture the entire world order. Meanwhile, American intelligence agencies detect unusual signals from Russian nuclear test sites deep beneath the Arctic ice in Novaya Zemlya. Unmarked convoys move under cover of polar night, and satellite images pick up heat signatures where there should be only permafrost. Something unprecedented may be underway, something that no one, not even the best-informed analysts, can fully decipher. The stakes are almost unimaginable. If leaders misread these signals, the world could stumble into a new era of nuclear brinkmanship, one where a single miscalculation might erase entire cities, ruin economies, and end millions of lives in the blink of an eye. This is no longer the stable deadlock of the past, but a volatile, unpredictable confrontation. One wrong move, one misunderstood message, and disaster could sweep across every border, from the windswept steppes of Central Asia to the packed avenues of New York or London. How did we arrive at this precipice after decades of uneasy peace? And what hidden forces are dragging us, step by step, back toward the abyss? To truly understand how the world reached this point, we must look back at the fragile foundations of nuclear peace and the cracks that have slowly widened beneath them, often hidden from public view. How did the most destructive machines ever created become, paradoxically, the uneasy guardians of our safety? For more than half a century, the threat of nuclear war has cast a long, dark shadow over the world. In the tense aftermath of the Cuban Missile Crisis in the early 1960s, leaders in Washington and Moscow faced a chilling realization. Even a single misread signal or snap decision, made in haste or confusion, could erase civilization in a matter of hours. This sobering truth forced bitter rivals to sit at the same table, forging agreements not from friendship or shared values, but from a mutual, bone-deep terror of mutual destruction. Treaties such as the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, and the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty did not abolish nuclear arsenals. Instead, they constructed a delicate equilibrium, one built on fear, constant vigilance, and the unspoken certainty that any misstep could unleash annihilation. This fragile balance of terror kept the peace, but always with a sense of dread, as if the world were tiptoeing along the edge of a bottomless cliff. Consider, for example, the events of September 1983. A Soviet satellite warning system reported an apparent incoming missile strike from the United States. The officer on duty, Stanislav Petrov, chose to trust his instincts and concluded it was a false alarm, refusing to report it up the chain. His calm decision in those tense minutes may have single-handedly prevented a nuclear apocalypse. This moment, largely unknown to the public, demonstrates how razor-thin the line between peace and annihilation truly was, and still is. That balance began to crumble in the early 2000s. The United States withdrew from the anti-ballistic missile treaty, shattering a pillar of strategic stability that had endured for decades. Russia, feeling betrayed and exposed, poured resources into developing new generations of weapons, hypersonic missiles capable of outmaneuvering any shield, and unmanned nuclear drones designed to wipe out entire coastlines. The world's nuclear architecture began to evolve in secret, away from the public eye. Each escalation deepened distrust. What started as a tense standoff between two superpowers morphed into a global knot of suspicion and ambition. China, North Korea, and Iran rapidly expanded their nuclear capabilities, seeing opportunity in the unraveling order. Old channels of communication faded, arms control talks stalled, and the familiar safeguards of the Cold War era vanished, one by one. Now, there are almost no hotlines, and barely any negotiations, only a growing possibility that confusion, human error, or a technical failure could spark a catastrophe. The danger is greater than ever. With the old rules dissolving and new weapons emerging, the risk of accidental launches, runaway escalations, or software glitches has multiplied. The safety nets are gone, and the world's margin for error narrows with each passing year. This is not merely a repeat of the Cold War. Today's nuclear tensions are tangled with technology, eroded diplomacy, and unpredictable actors, creating risks the world has never faced before. For instance, in 2023, a Russian military exercise involving simulated nuclear strikes triggered a massive cyber attack on European communication networks. Although armed conflict was avoided, the incident demonstrated how easily misunderstandings could spiral out of control in this new, hybrid era. The world's deadliest arsenals are being rebuilt for a new kind of standoff, one where algorithms, not generals, stand ready to fire. The old rules, painstakingly negotiated over decades, are fading away, replaced by systems that think and act at speeds no human can match. In the past, a crisis might unfold over hours or days, allowing time for back-channel diplomacy. Now, decisions may be made in seconds, by machines programmed to interpret ambiguous data. In Moscow, Vladimir Putin's order to weigh fresh nuclear tests is a warning shot with global consequences. For years, Russia has poured vast resources into apocalyptic weapons. The Burevestnik, a nuclear-powered cruise missile that could fly unpredictable paths for days, and the Poseidon, a torpedo-like drone capable of poisoning entire coastlines with radioactive fallout. These are not theoretical projects. They have been tested, refined, and are believed to be operational. Across the Atlantic, Washington races to keep pace. The United States is rolling out new intercontinental ballistic missiles and next-generation submarines, determined to stay ahead of Russian breakthroughs. But every technical leap only deepens distrust, trapping both powers in a cycle of suspicion where the worst-case scenario always feels possible. In a recent Senate hearing, senior Pentagon officials admitted that the speed of technological change has outstripped the ability of traditional arms control agreements to keep up. Recently, satellites have spotted suspicious activity at Russian nuclear sites in Novaya Zemlya and elsewhere. In Washington, the reaction is swift. Hawks demand that America respond with its own tests and deployments, escalating the spiral. The arms race is no longer just about firepower, but about whose machines can outguess the others. Cyber commands on both sides conduct war games, probing for weaknesses not just in missiles, but in the algorithms that control them. Diplomacy has collapsed into silence. Each side waits, wary of giving away any advantage, while experts warn that artificial intelligence and cyber weapons could turn a simple error into an irreversible catastrophe. The world now faces the possibility that a miscalculation, executed in milliseconds by a machine, could trigger nuclear war. Every new weapon invites an instant countermove. The pace is dizzying. The window for human judgment is closing fast. In this technological whirlwind, the fate of millions could hinge on a single algorithmic slip or misunderstanding. Imagine a scenario where a software update in an early warning system inadvertently flags a weather anomaly as an incoming missile. Without time for human verification, the system could launch a retaliatory strike, triggering a chain reaction no one can stop. With talks frozen and decision-making increasingly handed off to machines, humanity stands on the edge of disaster. The next move may not come from a leader's command, but from a line of code, a silent spark that could end everything. As the cycle of escalation accelerates, political leaders and intelligence agencies scramble for answers, desperate to regain some measure of control. But with every second, the balance of power tilts further toward the unknown, driven by technologies that few fully understand. Are we witnessing mere saber-rattling, or has a deadly chain reaction already begun, one that no one, anywhere, can control? Let us consider the roads ahead. In the first scenario, Russia carries out a tightly managed, symbolic nuclear test. The purpose is clear: to send a chilling signal of strength to the rest of the world, to demonstrate that Moscow will not be intimidated. While such a move might avoid immediate warfare, the backlash would be swift and severe. Sanctions would tighten overnight, international trust would wither, and the global diplomatic climate could freeze in a single night. Even in this so-called best case, the world inches closer to normalizing nuclear brinkmanship, making future crises even more volatile and unpredictable. History offers examples of similar escalations. In 1998, India and Pakistan conducted nuclear tests within weeks of each other, triggering a regional arms race and years of tension. The world condemned the moves, but the precedent was set. Nuclear shows of force could become bargaining chips in global politics. The current US-Russia standoff risks repeating this dynamic, but on a far more dangerous global scale. In the second scenario, the United States chooses to mirror Moscow's provocation, perhaps with its own test or by escalating further. This would spark a modern arms race, but not the kind the world remembers from the last century. Today, artificial intelligence and cyber warfare would accelerate the spiral, as both sides rush to outthink and outmaneuver each other. Rivalries would leap into cyberspace and advanced weapons systems, making it nearly impossible to distinguish a bluff from a real threat, or to know when a line has been fatally crossed. Imagine a world in which a cyber attack, launched by a third party or rogue actor, is misattributed to the other superpower, triggering a catastrophic response. The third scenario is the most terrifying. A fatal mistake, a technical flaw, or a cyber attack triggers a disastrous misreading. Imagine a warning system mistaking a test launch for an actual strike, or an algorithm making a catastrophic calculation based on incomplete data. Suddenly, automated protocols seize control, leaving world leaders with mere minutes to choose between retaliation or restraint. A single misinterpreted signal could unleash a launch sequence that cannot be stopped. In the past, human judgment served as a final safety net, but in a machine-driven age, the odds of accidental Armageddon climb to heights never before seen. Historical parallels abound. In 1979, a training tape was mistakenly loaded into a U.S. early warning computer, briefly indicating a massive Soviet attack. Only calm investigation prevented disaster. In today's environment, with far less time for verification and far more complex systems, such accidents could have far graver consequences. Regardless of the path, the economic shock would be monumental. A fresh nuclear arms race would drain trillions of dollars from national budgets and throw global markets into chaos. Investors would flee uncertainty, supply chains could shatter overnight, and neutral countries might race to build their own arsenals, fearing abandonment. The world economy, already fragile from pandemic recovery and trade disputes, could tip over the edge into collapse. The 1970s oil crisis, which plunged the world into recession, was triggered by a far smaller geopolitical shock. Imagine the consequences of nuclear brinksmanship on a global scale. Most alarming of all, the era when nuclear weapons were reserved as a last resort may be ending. Nuclear threats could become everyday political tools, wielded in conflicts large and small, normalizing risks that once seemed unthinkable. If nuclear blackmail becomes routine, every international dispute would carry the shadow of disaster. The world could slip into a state of permanent anxiety, where every diplomatic spat carries existential consequences. The wrong choice now risks more than another Cold War. It could destroy economies, destabilize entire continents, and place the very survival of humanity in jeopardy. The Chernobyl disaster of 1986, tragic as it was, affected only a fraction of Europe. Full-scale nuclear war would devastate civilizations. The question is not just which path world leaders will take, but whether they can find an exit before the doors slam shut. The stakes have never been higher or more uncertain. The doomsday clock, maintained by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, has never been closer to midnight. If rhetoric can push us to the brink, then only new thinking and decisive action can pull us back. History teaches that moments of crisis can inspire breakthroughs. The signing of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in 1987, for example, followed years of terrifying tension and public protest. Hope and nostalgia are luxuries we can no longer afford. The old doctrine of mutual deterrence, once a shield, now threatens to become a ticking time bomb in this era of blurred lines. Technology, mistrust, and ambiguous signals have eroded the clarity we once relied on. Transparency and dialogue are no longer optional. They are our last, real safeguards. When trust collapses, silence becomes as perilous as open threats. Leaders must double down on diplomacy, even when it appears futile, because every closed door brings us one step closer to disaster. The historic hotline between Washington and Moscow, established after the Cuban Missile Crisis, was credited with averting several crises. Today, such channels must be urgently restored and expanded. No algorithm, no matter how sophisticated, can replace human courage, doubt, or moral restraint. Machines cannot recognize the gravity of a fateful decision. They only amplify human choices, for better or worse. We cannot abdicate responsibility to technology in moments of crisis. The tragedies of history, whether the accidental shooting down of Korean Airlines Flight 007 in 1983 or the near miss at Petrov's console, remind us that human judgment, flawed as it may be, is irreplaceable. Societies themselves have a vital role. We must demand transparency from those in power and reject narratives driven by fear. Only an engaged, informed public can resist manipulation and keep leaders from reckless acts in our name. During the 1980s, mass movements for nuclear disarmament shaped government policy across Europe and North America. Civil society can still make a difference. Education is our strongest shield. Knowing what is truly at stake, understanding the catastrophic cost of nuclear escalation, helps us recognize propaganda and resist knee-jerk reactions. A public aware of the real consequences is less likely to sleepwalk toward catastrophe. Schools, universities, and media must teach the history, science, and ethics of nuclear weapons, not just their headlines. The risk is immediate and real. If people, leaders, and institutions do not adapt, the spiral of fear and mistrust may soon be irreversible. The future remains unwritten, but every decision, or indecision, now shapes the world we leave behind. So, what will you do in this defining moment? This is not just a question for policymakers. It is a call to every individual. The path forward depends on the choices we all make, starting today. Practical steps can make a difference. Support organizations advocating for nuclear risk reduction. Write to your representatives demanding renewed arms control efforts, and educate your peers about the realities of nuclear danger. Join public discussions, attend forums, and use social media to amplify calls for transparency and dialogue. The world is holding its breath, and your awareness could tip the balance. For many decades, the threat of nuclear war hovered like a distant storm, seldom spoken, but never forgotten. Now that storm has gathered new force, swirling with dangers our predecessors never imagined. The renewed nuclear tensions between the United States and Russia are not simply echoes of the Cold War. This is a volatile new era, shaped by shattered trust, blindingly fast technology, and a crowded world stage filled with new nuclear players. Gone are the days when careful diplomacy and red phones were enough. Today, Algorithms and artificial intelligence influence decisions, while information ricochets around the globe in seconds. Words, tweets, and rumors can ignite real-world crises faster than any missile, sometimes before anyone even realizes what is happening. This reality leaves the world perched on a razor's edge. A single miscalculation, a misunderstood message, or the reckless act of a rogue actor could shatter the fragile balance, unleashing consequences far beyond what old treaties ever anticipated. If even one leader falters, one algorithm glitches, or one system fails, the devastation could defy comprehension. But the most crucial truth is this: the future is not predetermined. Complacency is our most dangerous adversary. The risk lies not just in the arsenals of Washington and Moscow, but in the apathy of global citizens, the inaction of leaders, and the silence of ordinary people. If we treat these dangers as distant headlines, we risk repeating history, this time with consequences too horrific to imagine. Yet there is hope. If we remain vigilant, if we insist on transparency, foster honest dialogue, and challenge fear-driven narratives, we can break the cycle. Courage, paired with informed action from citizens everywhere, can steer the world away from disaster. The fate of humanity, the stability of nations, and the foundations of global trust all hang in the balance. Ultimately, it is up to each of us, through awareness, engagement, and resolve, to decide whether we allow escalation to spiral or choose to build a safer future. So, as the world stands on the brink, the final question is not what might happen if leaders press the red button, but what we, collectively, will do to ensure they never have to. Let us meet this moment, not with fear, but with clarity, courage, and commitment to a better path. The future is watching, and it begins with us.